Today I am with author Kate Goodwin, a new to me author. I'm so excited to talk to you, Kate. Just jump on in and let's hear about you.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Good.
So I am publishing my second book here in October, and my journey has been a little wild and crazy. I've always loved writing, but I didn't really know that I would have the opportunity to do this. I am a wife and a mom of two girls, mostly stay-at-home mom, although during the pandemic, my husband lost his job, and I
Oh,
started working in journalism.
well,
And yeah, so from home, I started working in pharmaceutical and biotech news journalism, which was a huge learning curve for me because I'd never done anything like that before. But
wow.
I'm
How did
kind
you
of a
end up with that? I mean, biotech, I wouldn't even know I don't even know what that is. I'm going to sound really stupid. I know what pharmaceuticals are, but I don't know what biotech is.
Yes, no, that's okay. A biotech is kind of the step before pharma company. So they're usually working on more new drug development, and then a lot of times they're picked up by a pharmaceutical, or they may start producing the drugs themselves if they get approved. So
Wow.
biotech is kind of that earlier stage company in the drug development process.
Okay. Wow. So you must have had to learn a lot of terms, right?
Oh, I sure did. Google was my best friend.
I'll
That's for
bet.
sure.
I'll bet. Okay. So you were not working outside the home previous to that.
I did before our children were born. I worked for a bank in the marketing department. So I did a lot of like copywriting, and they had me write up some courses, and sometimes I work on policy and procedure writing. So I had some technical writing background experience. But aside from that, I really just wrote for pleasure. And it was something that I enjoyed so much that when the opportunity arose, I was like, Lord, if you want me to do it, I know you'll equip me to do it. And he certainly has. I'll never forget that first piece I got, though. I just cried because I thought,
Oh,
what have I done? I am
oh,
so in over my head, but he
oh.
helped me through that one, and he's been helping me in all these years that I've been doing it. So
That's like a complete shift, though, from the technical writing into the fiction writing. I can imagine. I mean, I can't stand to read technical stuff. I can't imagine having to write it. So, when you say that your first piece, was it something that you handed over so somebody could edit it for you and give you some feedback?
yes. So like I'm a freelance journalist, and I work with one particular company, as opposed to spreading myself too thin because I'm still raising my children and doing other things as well. But yes, so she assigned me the piece, and I got it, and I'm looking over it, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. But I really truly believe if the Lord's on your side and you're willing to put in the work, he'll make up the difference every time, and he has
Absolutely.
for me.
I am absolutely in agreement with that. And if he will equip you to what he calls you to do, for sure.
Exactly.
So when did the writing bug first hit you? Like, to not technical writing, but the creative fictional side of things. When did that hit you for the first time? I mean, did you remember it as a child enjoying writing?
Yes, I loved creative writing when I was growing up. In fact, I still have a lot of the stories that I wrote from elementary through high school. I had won some awards. I remember having a poem published in a book for our state, growing up in Michigan. And I have kind of a fun story if you'd like to hear it about when I published my first book. So
Yeah.
I happened to be going through my box of memorabilia, and I found a short story I wrote in a creative writing class my junior year, and my teacher had written me a note on it. And when I saw the note, it triggered a memory of she had called me on my story. She'd given me an A, but she said, "See me after class." And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble because I talked a lot in school. So I did. I did get in trouble a lot. I thought, here we go. I'm in trouble again. But she just really encouraged me that, I think you have something here. If Have you considered going into writing as a career? And I thought, not really. I hadn't, I enjoy it, but I'm good enough, I think, at writing usually. So when I published my first book, I started trying to track her down. Now, she had already been probably in her 50s when I was in high school, and I am well past that now. So she had retired from the high school, but thanks to social media, I was able to track her down to where she's at now. And we had a phone call, and I told her about the book and how
Mm.
much she encouraged me. And it was just a really cool connection to be able to
Oh,
make.
I often think about teachers that influenced me when I was growing up and wishing, of course, it was a lot more than, I mean, you look like you're quite a bit younger than I am. So it would be hard to, like, my fifth grade teacher, I'll never forget him. And you think
Mhm.
about going back and I'm like, well, he's probably in his 80s by now, if I could even find him. And then I was a teacher for years. I taught middle school and I've had a couple students find me. And so that's just such a cool thing when you can encourage somebody like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
she really did. She was the first person that ever suggested to me. And life kind of took some turns after high school where I wasn't able to go to college and take that traditional route. But, again, God knows He sees the desires of our hearts. And when we kind of give up those dreams to Him and like, it's okay, I'm not going to push for it. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm content where I'm at. Somehow He comes along and sneaks behind and opens those doors anyways for us. And I feel like that's what He's done for me with this.
I really believe that God puts the desires on our hearts to start with.
Hmm.
Obviously, when we're drawn to something like that, then He's putting it there for reasons. And then in His timing, it'll come to fruition. So your first book was Every Step After It. It says a sweet romance mystery with mystery. And it's on Kindle Unlimited. So I'm definitely gonna download and read that book. I'm excited. I love Kindle Unlimited because I'm cheap and I don't like to buy
It's
books.
great.
I know it is. But so tell me where that story came from. What was the inspiration for that story?
Yeah, so I kind of, as you said, got the bug again to start writing, and I started working on like a Regency era piece, and I didn't know what I was doing and fumbled around too much, and that kind of fizzled out. But then when this story idea for Every Step After, which I've got here, when this came to me, I mean, it was
Higher,
all
hold
at
it a little higher for us.
once. Sorry, probably Zoom is
Like,
probably blurring it.
that's good. I know Zoom blurs it a little bit, so that looks good. Okay, we got
Yeah.
it.
So when the idea came to me, I thought, okay, I'm going to do it differently this time. I am not normally an outline person, but I thought I really want to finish this book. I have this great idea. I want to walk it all the way through. So I did a loosey-goosey outline, and that is what got me from point A to point B. I had the whole book written, I think, in 2 months. And
Wow.
then, yes, that I'm not sure how that happened. So don't ask me to explain that one. But so I did that. I queried with it a while, and I found querying to be a bit of a soul sucking process. And that was rough. Just felt like I put in so much effort to mostly not get any response at all, not even a no for the most part. So in
Usually,
Jan
with a new query, it could take 6 months to a year for somebody to respond if they do it all.
right. And to be honest, I just don't have that kind of patience.
Well, yeah. Well, and the other thing is there's so many opportunities now to not have to go with a publisher.
Right.
There are a lot of good indie authors out there. There's a lot of poor indie authors too. But,
Yes.
so, but if you have a good product, I think so you decided to go the indie route, I'm guessing.
Yes, yes. I decided to go the indie route. So in January, I published this one and really had no idea what I was doing, but I did it anyways. And I learned so much through that process. And to be honest, I felt like that book, I love the story. I absolutely love it. I still think it's a good story, but I felt like it was the book that I needed to teach me what I needed to know for the next one. That's how I truly feel about it. Because after that, I really felt called to write this deeply redemptive story that is way more of a women's fiction. It has just a tiny bit of romance at the end. And that kind of scared me because I had become really active on Bookstagram and Book Talk. Not that I have a big following, but and rom-coms were all the rage and sports romance, and even amongst the Christian authors, that's what I kept seeing. And I thought, nobody's going to want this book. This isn't any of those things, but I felt like it was what I was called to write, and
That's what
that's
you have to
that's
do.
what I had to write.
My first mentor teacher, I went to Mount Hermon Christian Writers Conference for several years up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, California. And the first mentor teacher I had, he's incredible. And we still go back and forth every now and then. He's an incredible man. But the first thing he said when I was concerned about that, because I was writing, it was a women's fiction. I was writing, my first book was inspired by my brother's suicide, who was a Christian, and then the family aftermath of that. And I was like, no one's going to want this book. It's all this other stuff. Amish was all the rage. It's like anybody could write Amish. I was just floored. And he said, don't be a genre hoe. Those were his words. He said, if you chase the genre, by the time you get done with that book, it's going to flip on you. You've got to do what God calls you to do, because when you do that, then he's going to come alongside and he's going to use that for his glory. So I
Right.
think that's, I mean, I saw people I saw a man who I would never say his name. His writing was not that impressive. I saw him several times there. He wanted to get published so badly. He was a middle-aged, balding, paunchy man. And he said, I want to get published. And they said, write Amish romance. And he said, okay. And that's what he does. And I'm like, it just, to me, it ruined the whole, it's like, I'm not going to make $1 million on this. You know what I mean? But
Right.
you got to be true to what God's calling you to write. And that's the best advice I could give. And now I started doing Southern fiction. And last year when I went to conference, I heard from somebody very high up that Southern fiction is the new rage. And I've been writing it now. I've got a full series. I'm on my second series of it. And I didn't know that. I just
Right.
wanted to write it because I'm living in the South and I love it, you know? So God's going to do what he's going to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And I really feel like he used the book so much in my own life while I was writing it. And then at this point, while we're talking, as you know, it hasn't quite been published yet, so I only have ARC reader feedback, but already I've had two ARC readers reach out just with the most, I mean, overwhelming feedback. As you know, it's a Hagar and Sarah retelling, right? So it's
Just so people know, we're talking about Reckless Love now. This
yes,
is the second book, which is coming out. Well, by the time this publishes, it's a beautiful cover, by the way. By the time this
thank you.
publishes, her book will have been out on October 4th, and we're publishing on the 17th. So I will put the link to that book in the show notes. And
Yes,
I
so
did
this is
put it-
obviously my proof copy, but um, you know, with it being a Hagar and Sarah retelling, I did have some concerns that it might be a difficult topic for a lot of women. So many women struggle with infertility, and that is such a painful journey to walk through. So that was a concern that I had, because obviously inspired by Hagar and Sarah, the Sarah character is a woman approaching 50 and has been trying to have kids for 25 years, and pressure is on. And so, you know, I was a little worried about that, but again, I just felt like this is what God wants me to do. So he's going to work it out. And two of my ARC readers reached out and told me about their infertility struggles that they're currently in, and how much the book meant to them, and how not only did they relate to my Melissa character, who's based on Sarah, but how that it turned their hearts to trust in God's plan and to be patient and to wait for it. And that was mind blowing to me. That was such a huge moment. I never really expected that. I'm writing because I love it and because I feel it, but for it to mean so much to someone else
But
it was really impactful.
God's putting that story on your heart for a specific reason. I think that we are called to be the comfort that we've received in our own lives. And I have one of my stories is actual on infertility, and then the mom finally getting the baby and then losing that child at the age of 5. And then so I had a hard time with that. And then when I wrote my first book was actually published third with my brother's suicide.
Mhm.
Was bipolar. And when I put that in there, I was like, people are going to come back on mental illness and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to get all kinds of flack. And I had more people say it's about time somebody mentioned mental illness and the church, and not if you just had enough faith, you could get through it,
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
do think, and my critique team talks all the time about, it's so important, because a lot of people who are struggling with something, they can't deal with it face to face with somebody telling them, but when they read it in another character,
Mhm.
it's easier to accept. It's easier to walk through, because you see this character, you feel for this character, and then all of a sudden it's impacting you and what you go through. It's not
Mhm.
the same thing as somebody in your face telling you about it.
Right.
So, I mean, I applaud you for writing this book, and I think it's going to be very impactful. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly when I started writing it, kind of an interesting thing is, so the two main characters, Melissa, I mentioned, is Sarah, and then Amina is the daughter of these immigrant family that came over. They're in Tennessee in a small town, so there's your southern aspect.
Is it real town or fake fictional?
It is fictional, but I wrote it specifically because of a small town that I used to visit when I was a kid, where my great grandma lived, and we would play on her farm, and I just have the best memories from there. So that is why it's in a small town in Tennessee.
Can you
That is
tell me
very
what
much
town that was? I'm just curious if I know it.
McEwen, Tennessee.
Is that Eastern Tennessee?
It's kind of, it's about 45 minutes west of Nashville.
Okay, so we're an hour south of Nashville.
Okay, yes. So that's where I kind of drew some inspiration from. But as I went forward with it, first, just of course, rereading the story of Sarah and Hagar and studying that, I really had a lot of feelings about Melissa, almost like she was this villain because, Sarah was so mean to Hagar.
Was.
So
Yeah.
as I started to look at that, but I felt like God did such a work in my heart writing it because I wasn't even going to tell her perspective at first. I was just going to have the girl's perspective, Amina's perspective. And, the story is that she got pregnant by a guy who was just passing through town. He had left her, with a fake phone number so that there's no connection. So she's kind of on her own. And culturally speaking, of course, a lot of shame with her family because of being pregnant at 18 and no father, right? So she ends up with the small town's pastor and his wife, who have been trying to have a baby all this time and have been barren. And so the wife, Melissa, feels like this is God's answer, right? All this happens in the beginning. So this is spoiler free. This is right from the get-go where we come in at. But so initially I was really feeling like Melissa was almost this villain in the story in a way. But when I started writing her and really reflecting on how much pain she must have been in. In the story, it's that her husband, his father was the pastor before him and his father before him. So they had this family legacy, of an Abrams man, that's their last name, in the pulpit. And so it's all this pressure on her to produce a son to carry on the legacy. And it's just not happening. And like the pain that she would have walked through with that and recognizing that how difficult that was, it really shifted my perspective on the whole story. It's like, she's not a villain. She's just a woman who's hurting.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all. And same with Amina, because sometimes she's a very prickly character. Like she's kind of hard to live with because she's kind of an angry and hurting 18-year-old, who's having this baby. And she's not a bad guy either. They're just hurting people and so they kind of both are able to get a redemption story from that. One, even though she's a pastor's wife, she has a path to walk as well. She hasn't arrived yet. And so taking Melissa through that path as well, because clearly Sarah had some things in her heart that needed worked out too, right? So
Well, I
that was
think
a
it's
coolest
true.
experience.
Just human nature. I don't think just because you're a pastor's wife or even a pastor, you've got your stuff together, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, if I don't know if you ever read the Left Behind series, but it was the pastor that got left behind. So
Right.
that tells you something,
That tells you something, yes. And I think some of that resonated with me because I'm married to a pastor's son, and his mom was just the best to me. But I know she used to talk about like, I wasn't always this way. Like God had to do a lot of things in me. I didn't meet her till later in life when to me it seemed like she had everything figured out. And of course she was like, no, when I first became the pastor's wife, I had no idea what I was doing. And the Lord took her through that path. And so in a way I was able to kind of reflect back to her. She passed a couple years ago now. And so I felt like that was a little piece of my heart too.
Right. I understand that. Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible when you dig into story, when you dig into characters and find that there's so much brokenness in the world. I bet you probably could walk into any church on any given Sunday, and about 30% of those people are just totally struggling with something.
Mhm.
And
Right.
there's a gazillion stories out there based on that.
Oh yeah. It's the sick that need a physician, right? Not the well.
And you're not going to find him well. I mean, if we're all that, he's ready to take us home because we have no use anymore. We are of no
Yeah.
use, it's iron
Right.
sharpens iron. So these stories, and then, so tell me your process. You decided to indie publish. How did you find did you have to go out and find a book cover designer and somebody to format for you and an editor and all that? Have you gone to conferences, or how did you learn the craft? There's so many questions and we don't have a ton of time. So to dig into a little bit of that, whatever you feel like talking about.
Sure. I absolutely am still very much a learner in this space. But especially with my first few books before I'm starting to, as I'm building, and it was something I was very hesitant to, take from family finances for, right? So I tried to explore the avenues that were the most affordable possible. So like with my first cover, I found a girl on Etsy And she designed this beautiful cover, which I've gotten so many compliments on. And she charged less than $100 for the ebook and paperback, which I hope she started charging more now, because I was like, girlfriend, you are underselling yourself, because she did a beautiful job there. And then my second cover for Reckless Love, I ended up using Meeblart, which is a company, a design company that does a lot of book cover designs. They'll do website things for you. They do character art, whatever you want to hire them for. So they are the ones who were able to kind of take my vision for Reckless Love. Because I did, for this cover, I did have a vision for it in my mind, where the first one I was like, I have no idea. Just what do you think? You know, so we learn as we go. When it came to formatting for the first two books, I actually used a free online website called Readsy. And you can write in Readsy, and you can directly export to an ebook and a paperback. And I think that's a great option for someone who's just starting out, who doesn't just have a bunch of revenue coming in from prior book sales to use. I would love to have a little more professional in the future. I would love to pay someone else to do it. That'd be great.
You can get Vellum, you can get Vellum, the program Vellum. And I do know somebody who, we can talk later. I do know somebody who formats for $70.
Oh, wow. That's a good price. Yes. I do have Atticus now. So I'm working on with that, because Vellum is Mac only. So Atticus is, yes, for us non-Mac people.
It was a price to pay.
So yes, so I'm trying out Atticus, and that wasn't too much. I think that was like 147 to buy Atticus. So that was good. But if there is someone who needs a free option, I tell you what, you cannot really ask for more for a free option than what you get from Readsy, because it gives you a very normal looking book. There's nothing in it that thinks, this is formatted kind of weird. It came out just fine. It just doesn't have those extra pretty features that a lot of books have now. So that's what you'll be lacking.
Atticus, because I looked at Atticus too. Is there a learning curve for that? Does it seem like it's a little, or does it seem?
So I've just started using it, and it already seems better. I had done a trial of Scrivener before that. And when I did the trial of Scrivener, I was like, oh my word, I cannot figure this out. So I do think Atticus is more user-friendly than Scrivener is. And I hope I'm saying that right. It might be Scrivener.
You mean to write, in or to?
You can do both. You can write in it and format that way, or you can write in something else and then upload it to format. It's your choice.
I write in Scrivener, so that's why I was asking.
Oh yes, for the formatting. And again, I only looked at it for just a few minutes with like the free trial. And I was like, this feels like more than I can take on right now. It is such a hard balance between your creative time and your administrative time, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the marketing and all that. There's just so much that goes with it.
Exactly. Exactly. So yes, very steep learning curve, that too. I thought, man, if you're a writer, you just get to write. Isn't that wonderful? No.
Happy, nice. I've heard the story when I was teaching middle school. We would read a lot of Mark Twain, and I heard the story that Mark Twain sent a book in to get published, and they came back and said, you have absolutely no punctuation in this book. Like, it's so poorly written. So he then typed up pages of punctuation and sent that in and said, stick it wherever you want it. So but that was Mark Twain. We can't get away with anything.
We can't get away with that, because now there's so many people writing. They're like, we'll just find somebody else. It's fine.
So do you have another book in mind? Are you working on number 3?
I do. I've been filling up my notes app on my phone. I will be laying in bed and I'm trying to go to sleep, and then I'm like, oh, hang on. Let me just type this in. My husband's like, oh my word, put your phone away.
That's really cool. I mean, it's good that you do that. I don't want to do that.
Well, I used to not. And then I realized I don't remember them. Like, I would have this idea driving down the road, and I think I'll have to remember that. It never sticks. I don't know if it's
I know
these are filling my head or what, but I cannot hold on to those good ideas.
I totally get that. And my husband is very much, and he's like 9 years older than me. So he's very like the paper calendar, and there's no technology. And he'll say, you need to carry a notebook around with you. And I'm like, well, I have my phone. How often do you, I'll pull some notes out, but it's really true. You don't remember, and you think you will.
Right. Right. Even sometimes just like a clever little quote, like, oh, that would be a good line, just anything. And so the note is very random. If somebody else opened this note, they would be like, what in the world is this nonsense? But
We are in we're here in the Tennessee, and so a lot of the people I go to church with are a lot older, and they've got the accent. They've got the weirdest um, idioms that come out of their mouths, and I think I'm going to remember them, and I don't, but they're perfect, And it's like you need to write those down. There's little treasures and keep them and
yes.
use them. So what can you give us a little glimmer of what your next book is going to be about? Do you have some idea?
So, yes, not to paint myself into a corner, but honestly, the next idea I was most excited about was doing kind of a redemptive Samson and Delilah inspired story.
Really?
So
Contemporary
that's
contemporary again?
yes, contemporary. And actually, I'm hoping to have some overlapping settings. So I think it needs to
That in a
take place in
Christian,
Nashville, but
how are you going to do that in a Christian? I mean, Delilah as a Christian, that's going to be tricky.
yep, yep. Well, she might not start out that way.
Samson too. Neither one of them were all that.
Samson too.
It was
That is
horrible.
something that's kind of scared me with this one is, of course, the whole morally gray character. That's a big trending topic, isn't it, in books right now? And I'm like, really, they're both morally gray. Even Samson, he made
Well,
terrible decisions.
not just that, you have to wonder how smart he was when she kept asking and doing these things. And I read that every year when I go through my Bible, the Bible through a year, and I get to
Yeah.
that. The guy, I hate to speak ill of one of the judges, but he was an idiot. It's like
He
seriously
really was. And I think, I
asking for where
almost
you're.
wonder if it's kind of like what a lot of people think happened with Adam is that like he knew he was doing the wrong thing, but his love overwhelmed that. And because he did love Delilah, and I think he knew exactly what she was about because she even tells them like, you made me look stupid in front of the rest of the Philistines
Or
because
maybe he
tell
didn't
me.
believe it would matter. Maybe he was just playing. I just didn't figure
Right.
it would make a difference.
That's what I think. I think his ego was so high at that point that he felt like he was infallible. So even if I tell her my secret, it doesn't matter. I'll still be able, as the scripture said, I'll still be able to get up as times before. And he didn't even realize God wasn't with him anymore.
Well, and that was the thing. Once you start, I mean, it started early for him. He started sinning way early,
Oh
doing
yeah.
and done and killing lions and eating food out of them and all kinds of stuff.
Yep. Immediately running on like, demanding to marry a woman that he shouldn't have been marrying in the first place, even before Delilah. So yeah. He's got kind of a messed up story, but I'm like, we all do. So I think there might
I
be
don't
something
know.
there.
That's a pretty messed up story, though, Kate. That's a little bit off. Good. I would love to read that, though. I would.
I promise it won't follow it directly. He's not going to tie any foxes' tails together and light a field
Light
on
him up
fire. So,
or knock down a temple with his strength.
and obviously I take some liberties because I want it to be redemptive. So the ending is going to have some changes as well because that's not
Well,
just like in the scripture with the Sarah and Hagar retelling. We don't know what really happened to Hagar after that time in the wilderness, but we do know that God saw her and he provided for her. And so kind of moving on from that in this story too, that's what I imagine it ending up as. So
well, it kind of reminds me of Francine Rivers' Redeeming Love, what she did with the book of Hosea. And so that was one of the most beautiful stories that I had ever read. And they kind of ruined it in film because they took some Hollywood license, which was very sad. But the book
and they
itself,
took out so much of the redemptive aspects. That was the biggest, which I guess that's not surprising. Hollywood, of course, would take out the redemptive aspects, but it just made the storyline fall so flat because that was the main storyline, and you literally took out the main storyline, so that was never going to work.
you kind of
Yeah.
wonder why Francine Rivers would give that up, allow them to do that. But that's not for us to say.
That's
So
not per se. That is a beautiful story. And I would never, I would never assume to put myself in the same sphere as Francine Rivers. But I do feel like if you loved that book, but you also love contemporary stories, that's kind of the feels that you get from Reckless Love. Because it has, you can definitely draw parallels to the story. In fact, I really felt like I ended up with even more parallels than I initially intended to. So that's what I mean when I'm like, God just must take control because I swear this is more ideas than I had once the book comes out.
I absolutely believe that. I absolutely like I do a very loose. I used to never do any outlining.
Mhm.
I wrote myself in a corner my first book, but I do very loose. And it seems like no matter what I do, God brings in characters I had not intended. And all of a sudden it takes a shift. And then it fills in these blanks that I was not quite sure how I was going to fill in. And it's not me. I swear, I'm just the
Right.
typist. And so
Yes.
believe that. I absolutely believe that. If I read something I wrote and I'm going, wow, this is so good, I didn't write it. I know for sure I didn't write it. So
100%. I have literally told my husband that so many times that like I feel like I can't even take credit for this because I actually on my notes app I have book ideas and I had the original note when I thought of this story idea and looking at that measly little note that was terrible, quite frankly, and then seeing where we came out now, I'm like, okay, that wasn't even me. I don't know.
how he works. Well, it has been such an amazing pleasure talking to you, Kate. What a joy. Thank you so much for sharing your books. I can't wait to read. I'm going to read every step, but I can't wait until Reckless Love comes out because I'm going to snatch that one up too. And actually, again, by the time this publishes, Reckless Love will have already been out for a couple of weeks. So you'll have the show notes for that. And if you could just share with whatever social media, because Kate does not have a website at this point. So whatever social media you have, we'll get those links in the show notes as well so people can follow you and follow you on Amazon. And I just wish you all the best luck. I think you're going to have an incredible success with this.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really enjoyed our talk, honestly, and you've been such an encouragement. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Nice meeting you. Bye.
Nice meeting you.